All right, okay, let's get started. So welcome to our webinar, Managing Your Course in myCourses. My name is Teddy Contoro, and I am here today with my colleague, Barbara Stutchison. We are both learning technology consultants with Teaching and Learning Services. Also joining us today is Adam Finkelstein, who is the Associate Director of Learning Environments at TLS, and he will be moderating the chat during our session. There are a few items I would like to bring to your attention before we begin. This session is being recorded. If you would prefer not to be visible, you can turn off your video so that you don't appear in the recording. Also, the slides for this webinar and the recording, as well as additional resources, will be posted on the TLS website. And please note that you have been muted upon entry for the duration of the webinar. Barbara and I will be answering your questions at the end of the session. We have set 10 minutes aside at the end of this. However, feel free to use the chat while we're presenting if you would like to type in any questions, and our moderator, Adam, will be happy to address your questions there. So we have 3 session outcomes for you today, and we will be looking at designing your homepage with purpose to enhance the course experience. We're going to look at identify strategies and procedures for managing students' grades using grades, or also called the gradebook. And finally, we're going to track student activities using class progress and intelligent agents. So let's get started. Here's Barbara.
Thanks, Teddy, and hi, everyone. So we're going to begin with what your students first see when they enter your course. So this is your course homepage. And a great way to help you manage your course is to design a homepage that's meaningful for both you and your students. So in the slides that follow, we're going to look at some strategies and recommendations to help you design a homepage that does exactly that. When you or your students first click on a course from the main landing page in myCourses, you'll see a page similar to what you see here. So this is called your course homepage, and each course homepage has a default navigation bar, a banner, and widgets. However, the default is not your only option. It's fully customizable depending on your preferences, and you have quite a bit of control over what your students see here. So it's important to design a homepage with purpose and really think through what's most important within the context of what your students need to know or do. So you're going to want to consider limiting what you place on your homepage so that it only includes useful information. And also organize your page to help your students find the resources they need when they need them. So remember, the key here is that you want to enhance the learning experience for your students. And some of the ways you can do this is by customizing your nav bar, your banner, and your widgets. So let's take a look at how we can do that. So a default banner image is applied to each course, and the purpose of the banner is to add visual styling and context to your course. However, the default may not always be appropriate. So I think back to when I met with an instructor who was teaching an anatomy course, and his banner image was that of a roller coaster. So something similar to what you see here. However, the default banner may be completely appropriate within the context of your course. And if the default is something that you like, then by all means, you can keep it as is. But it's also good to know that you have the option to replace it by choosing a new image from the hundreds of images in the image bank. So as you can see here, we now have replaced our roller coaster with something more appropriate for an anatomy course. Also note that you have the option to create and upload a custom banner. So if you choose to create a custom banner, you just have to make sure it is the correct dimensions. And note that dimension specifications and details on how to change your banner, as well as any of the steps that we're going to be referring to during this presentation, are all already posted as resources on the TLS website. So next, let's look at customizing your navigation bar. So what you see here is the navigation bar that is applied to all courses by default. It contains the most commonly used tools, such as content, Zoom, lecture recordings, discussions, assignments, and grades. And note that the two last items, the class list and the course admin, are only visible to you and not to your students. You can change the navbar to reflect which tools you will be using in your course. So you're likely going to want to keep the content, grades, Zoom, and lecture recordings, as well as whichever engagement and assessment tools you're using. So this could be quizzes, assignments, discussions, etc. If you wish to customize the navbar, you can do so by clicking on the three little blue dots that you see highlighted here. And this will bring you to a page where you can easily delete and add tools. So for instance, if you're using the quizzes tool in your course, you will need to add it to your navbar since it does not appear here by default. So this is important because students will not be able to access any assessments created using the quizzes tool if it's not added to your toolbar. It's important to be selective about the links you have on the navbar. So not only adding links to tools that may be missing, but also removing tools that you aren't using. So also the order they appear in is also something to consider. So we normally recommend that you place the most frequently accessed tools from left to right, because you want to remember that visual organization is important in helping your students find what they need quickly and easily. Another way you can customize your homepage is by changing your widgets. So each of the boxes that you see here on your right is referred to as a widget. The default widgets are the announcements widget and the calendar widget. You can customize your homepage by changing these widgets and also by adding others. And the widgets that you choose to include on your homepage should do two things. They should ease navigation and help with communication. You want to help your students find information easily and quickly by providing them with methods to access frequently used course resources, and also use widgets that help you share up-to-date course information and help your students stay on top of such things such as course due dates. So in the next few slides, we're going to look at reviewing the widgets that we find really useful and highly recommend in helping you to manage your course. So the first widget we'd like to recommend is the announcement widget, which, as I mentioned, is one of your default widgets. It's a place to add messages that you would like students to see when they log into your course. You can use the announcement widget to communicate important information to students, such as a welcome message at the start of the semester, extensions to assignment due dates, follow-ups from in-class discussions, links to new resources, course reminders, such as an upcoming deadline, changes to assignments, etc. So there's really a lot of great uses for the announcement widget. You're not only limited to using text in your announcements, you can add a variety of media, such as images, links, you can embed a YouTube video, and you can even record a video message using your computer's webcam. And this is a really great way to create a more personal touch or help improve engagement with your students. And you can also personalize your message further by incorporating your student's name. So as you can see here, it says, "Welcome, Barbara." And this can be done by using a simple variable called a replace string when editing your announcement. And instructions on how you can do this is found in the resources that we're sharing with you on the TLS website. The next widget we'd like to recommend is another default widget. It's the calendar widget. And the calendar widget is a great way to help your students stay on top of due dates, as well as other important course deadlines, such as exams, assignment deadlines, etc. You can create your own custom events, such as if you're having a special presentation or a guest speaker or an upcoming holiday, and you can even schedule recurring events. Deadline dates that are set up in other myCourses tools, such as assignments or quizzes, are automatically displayed here, so you don't have to enter them in twice, which is really nice. And students will see up to 14 upcoming events or deadlines in this widget. They can also access the full calendar simply by clicking on the widget. Another really nice feature with the calendar widget is that students can subscribe to it with the preferred calendar software, such as Google Calendar, Outlook, iPhone, or Android Calendar. So the next widget we would like to recommend is the teacher profile widget. So this is not one of the default ones. The teacher profile widget is a custom widget that can be added to your homepage. So we really like this widget because it gives you a space to introduce yourself to your students. You can share your photo, a short bio, and even your social media details if you want. This is completely optional, however. It's a nice widget to add to make your course feel more personable for your students and also give you more presence. Because when students feel like the instructor is more present in an online environment, they're likely to be more engaged. And finally, the last widget we'd like to recommend is the visual table of contents widget. So this is another custom widget that you can add to your homepage. And we really like it because it allows for quick and easy access to your course content through visual and interactive tiles. So each of the little squares that you see here on your right is referred to as a tile. And each of these tiles represents a content module from your course. So by clicking on one of these tiles, you are brought directly to a specific module, and each course module's title is displayed within the tile. And there's also a little information icon. It's the eye that you may see there in the upper left-hand corner. It's a bit small to see. And this can be selected to flip the tile to reveal the module's description. Also, students can track their progress for each module by looking at a progress bar and the number of completed topics. So what you see here may be familiar to some of you who may have completed the myCourses Essentials course. So what you can see in this example are 6 modules which are represented. One is flipped to reveal the description for a specific module. And you'll also notice that as a student, I can see that I've completed 50% of the content within each module, and it also displays how many topics I've visited. So we recommend this widget for courses with 8 to 10 content modules or less, because your homepage will begin to get quite long and will require much scrolling if you have a course with, say, 20 modules. So once you've finished designing your homepage and you've added some content to your course, the next step is to think about how you can manage your student grades. And myCourses has a great tool for this. It's called the Grades tool. However, it's commonly referred to as the Gradebook. So the Gradebook represents all the work that you want to evaluate your students on in a course. It is where you can evaluate specific tasks, such as assignments, quizzes, participation, presentations, exams, etc. And as you can see in this example, I have 4 items that I will be evaluating, including an assignment, a midterm, a participation grade, and a final exam. You can enter grades for individual items, or if you have your gradebooks linked to other tools in myCourses, such as the quizzes tool or the assignments tool or the discussions tool, then your grading for these items will automatically flow into the gradebook. And we find that students really appreciate when instructors use the grades tool because it allows them to see their progress in the course. So here you can see an example of a student's view of the gradebook. It's here that they can verify their grades on a specific assignment or test. They can also see additional feedback that the instructor may have included, and they can also view their final grade, but only once it has been released by the instructor. So why use the gradebook? Well, there's a lot of great reasons to use it. The first is that it does the math for you. Grades are automatically calculated, which is really nice. Also, multiple users can enter grades at the same time. So this is especially handy if you have TAs in your course and they're helping you to grade assignments. It's also great for record keeping. You don't need to deal with Excel spreadsheets, emails, notes, etc. You can manage it all from one place. You can enter your grades and even include feedback to accompany each of your grades. You can manage exactly what students see as well. So you can decide what grade items you want students to see and when they see them by either hiding or making visible specific grade items in your gradebook. You can decide whether they see their grades as a points value, as a percentage or letter grade, and whether they can see the calculation method or logic behind their final grade. Also, final grades are not released to students automatically unless you explicitly publish them. You can also sort, filter, and view statistics. So you can view details about a class, a group, or a section's overall grades for your course. And your statistics include such things as the minimum grade, maximum grade, a graph showing the distribution of grades, etc. And finally, myCourses makes it very easy to transfer your students' final grades directly to Minerva. There is an export to Minerva wizard available in the gradebook tool. So the key takeaway here is that the grades tool is a huge time saver, and it's also a great way to help you manage your student grades in one place. All right, so as the instructor, you determine how to set up your gradebook to best reflect your approach to evaluation in your course. Before you start setting up your gradebook, first you need to take some time to think through the following questions. So the first question is, which course activities do you plan to evaluate? And in this example, you'll see that I'm evaluating my students on 3 quizzes, a group project, a written report, they're going to have a participation grade, and a final exam. The next question is, which grading system is most appropriate for your course? So you want to determine how the items you are evaluating your students on contribute to their final grades. So will it be a weighted or points-based gradebook, for instance? And how will points or weights be allocated? So for example, my gradebook is weighted. My 3 quizzes are each scored out of 25 points, and they're worth each 10% of the final grade. My group project is out of 10 points, out of 100 points, and it's worth 20% of my final grade. My written report is out of 100 points, worth 20% of my final grade. My participation grade is going to be out of 5 points and worth 5% of my final grade. And my final exam is out of 100 points and worth 25% of my final grade. So you can see that all of my weights for each of the individual items add up to 100%. The next question is, how will you handle ungraded items? So the options here are that you can choose to drop ungraded items. So in this case, if a student did not complete one of the 3 quizzes, it will be assumed that the grade for this one quiz is excluded from the student's final grade calculations, so that the final grade will be inflated. Or the other option is that you can choose to treat ungraded items as 0. So this option will issue a 0 for anything that is not graded. So if a student did not complete a quiz, they receive a 0. And finally, how will final grades be calculated? So there are 2 options here as well. You can use the final calculated grade, which means that the final grade is calculated by the gradebook. You cannot adjust the final grade without adjusting individual grade item scores. Or you can use the final adjusted grade, which allows you to manually change the final grade calculation without affecting grade item scores. So note that if you plan to export to Minerva, you will have to use the final adjusted grade as your final grade. The reason being that Minerva does not allow for decimal places, therefore you need to round your grades accordingly before exporting. So once you've thought through these questions, you can begin setting up your gradebook in myCourses. And you will see the grade setup wizard page when you navigate to the grades tool for the first time. The grade setup wizard guides you through a series of 7 steps, including such things as your calculation options, such as your grading systems and schemes, as well as display options for both you and your students, such as how many decimal places, how many decimal points will be displayed, whether grades students see will be in the form of a letter, a percentage, or a number of points, etc. As a best practice, we highly recommend that you use the grade setup wizard before creating grade items in your gradebook, because making changes to a gradebook settings and calculation options after you begin tracking student grades can significantly affect existing data. So once you've completed your setup, you can begin creating your grade items, entering and managing your grades, and sharing this data with your students as you see fit. The gradebook is really a great way to help manage student grades and keep an eye on your student progress throughout the term. And another way to track student progress is via the class progress tool. And so now I'm going to pass it over to Teddy. He's going to continue and he'll explain more about this.
Okay, thanks, Barbara. All right, so next we're going to go to tracking student data. So you've set up your course in myCourses, you've curated and developed your material, created fixed and flexible activities, but how do you know if students are accessing the material and engaging in myCourses? So how can you keep students on track? And what if you have a large class? So in this remote environment, we don't have as many cues to rely on, like students not showing up to class, their facial expressions. So how about letting myCourses do some of that analytics for you? So first we have the class progress tool. It's available for all instructors, either from the default navigation bar, or you can also view it in the course admin. And depending on what items you have made available in your course, you can see which areas students have been accessing and completing. So for example, in this view, I have added content visited, discussions, logins, and grades. You can also display quiz and assignment indicators, but you can only have 4 indicators displayed at once. And if you hover over each bar on the student, so if you hover there, this is only a screenshot, but if you hover over there, you would actually see more details and you can click and drill down to the student. What I find most interesting in this particular view is not so much whether students have visited the content or logged into the system directly here, but the discussions. You can tell whether students are spending time reading through the threads, but not necessarily authoring any posts. So if you're planning on weekly discussion threads, this will eventually be a great place to come back and take a look. Just like all the system type data, we have to interpret this data with a grain of salt. Not all students are the same. Some spend more time interacting with the material in myCourses. Others would prefer reading the textbook. Others love to hang out in the discussion board. Others avoid it unless it has a grade attached to it. And even some students will click more if they know you're paying attention. So lots of activity in myCourses will not necessarily mean a successful student. This being said, if you look at the overall data and pattern, a student that does not access much material, has not read any postings, and is logging in frequently within the past 2 weeks of the course, well, that might raise a flag. Another question is, if you have a large class, you may end up with several pages over here to navigate in class progress. What you could do instead is click here, the filter to, and use groups, and you can filter by groups. Some instructors already create groups of students, for their teaching assistants. This way you can reduce the number of students per page, or even ask your TAs to keep an eye on their group. Another interesting part about class progress is that you can drill down to see the specific details for a particular student. So in this case, if you have a student asking a particular question on the course outline, you can verify if they viewed it before or after it was updated. So you can see here it was visited twice, and you can also see the date and time it was last visited. Earlier, we saw that login information of all students, this was pertaining to the login to myCourses, not particular to your course. You can, however, drill down to see when the student has logged into the course and how many days between each login when you click on there. So you can see this is the particular course access. And finally, you can take a look at the overall discussion activity. You can even open each thread and read each post made by the student to view the quality of each post. So this would again be a great place to come back if you're assessing discussions later. So it can be actually challenging to keep track of each individual student using the class progress once you have a class of over, let's say, 50 students. So you can use another tool called Intelligent Agents, which will send an email based on a certain criteria that you set. So even though it is automated, you can personalize the email by adding variables, like what Barbara mentioned earlier, such as the student's first name and the course title. So those are intelligent agents, including with the variables. Now I'm forgetting the name, but actually, oh, anyway, we'll get back to that when I get to it.
Replace string.
Replacement strings. Thanks, Barbara. All right, so examples that you can use the intelligence agents for is you can flag you or your teaching assistants when a student seems to be falling behind. So the criteria in this case, if you're trying to flag, is for the students not submitting the assignment by the particular due date. You can also set reminders on key deadlines. So the criteria here is they're not accessing the assignment or quizzes X number of days before the deadline, or not logging into the course, for example, for the past 7 days. So 7 days is, for example, a fairly good guideline where students should be logging in at least every week. So you can set them a reminder saying, hey, we've noticed that you're not accessing the course. You can also send emails, not just about tracking the students, whether or not they've been accessing things, but also you can also take a look and send them a welcome email to all students, for example, that have accessed the course for the first time. You know, I hear that there are some instructors thinking about opening their course ahead of time, and it might be a good idea to send students that are accessing the courses early, maybe a personalized email informing them of what they might expect to see in the course, and maybe even asking them to fill out an anonymous survey. And finally, you can also automatically send encouraging email messages based on completion of activities. So for example, we talked about the discussions earlier. Thank you for posting in the welcome discussion thread. Or maybe even mid-semester, congratulations, you have completed half of the coursework. So we've talked about the tools that you can use to organize and communicate to your students. You will likely be making some tweaks and changes to the course. You can use the class progress and the analytics that myCourses provide to make assumptions on students' behavior. But perhaps a more direct method to gather feedback is just to ask students directly. So for example, you can create an anonymous survey where you can ask the simple questions of which particular activities are helping you learn? And if there was one thing that you could change about this course, what would it be? In fact, I'd like to direct you to a resource on mid-course evaluation that will provide you different options to gather this feedback. Whether it's a survey, you can also create an anonymous discussion board, or you can also use polling at McGill. Okay, so we've given you a lot of information today. And if you haven't seen this course yet, a good next step would be to take a look at the course in myCourses called myCourses Essentials on your myCourses homepage. That's a lot of myCourses. It's a self-paced tutorial that includes descriptions on the most commonly used tools in myCourses, including the best practices and links to step-by-step instructions for setting up the tools. You can navigate it through either as a full course, or you can just refer to it as you need when you're building your course. I would also like to remind you that this webinar is part of a series. You can register to the others on the TLS website. There's actually a few more offered this week. I would also like to mention that these webinars are available to show you the different options you might consider, but please don't feel pressured that you must adopt it all. Please pick and choose the changes that you will have that will have the most impact for you, your students, and your course, and something that you will continue to use beyond remote delivery. And if you can't make the live sessions this week, most of these webinars have already been given, and you can choose to access the recordings on this website. The link that you see here will be posted in a chat for you to copy right there. And you will be able to stream the recordings from the links on the right-hand side and download the slides. But most importantly as well is please make sure you expand the resources and readings here so you can click and take a look at the links that Adam has been posting throughout this session, but also any others that we may add after this session. So this concludes the webinar portion on our end, but we would like to know, one, what is your most important takeaway from today's session? And two, do you have any additional questions on what we covered today? So feel free to type in your answers in the chat window, And we'll be using at least the next 10 minutes to take in some questions as we go through.
Yeah, I'd like to address while everyone's typing in any questions that they may have. A question that came up earlier from Stefan. It was, can the weight of the marks be different for different groups of students in your class? So the short answer is that no, you can't have different weights for different students in terms of each of your grade items holding a different weight for different groups of students. However, you can set up your gradebook so that, for instance, if you're creating different options for assignments, so if you have 3 different assignment options and students only have to submit one of the assignments, you can set it up so that you have a grade item for each of your assignments, and your gradebook can be set up so that it drops whatever items your student do not submit to, so that they're not penalized for the items they don't submit to. So that's one way of working with the gradebook so that your weights do reflect different options given to different students. I hope that answers your question. Okay, perfect, great. Just looking to see what other questions are coming in. Just a couple comments. Not really seeing many questions. There is one that we often get about like linking the gradebook to any tools in myCourses. And I did mention a little bit about this earlier, but maybe just to reinforce the point that if you create an assignment and you link it to your gradebook, those grades are automatically transferred into your gradebook so that you don't have to enter your grades twice. So, and that's the case for other tools as well. So it's assignments, quizzes, and discussions all have this capability. So that's really nice that you just have to grade in one place and then it's automatically transferred to your gradebook. You just have to make sure the two are linked.
We got a great question from Philip about publishers and whether they link to the gradebook. And so we do have a couple of publishers that are already approved through McGill, such as Wiley and Pearson. The question is, some of them do integrate with the gradebook, some don't. So it's something that you have to take a look to see. And if there are any publishers that you don't do that you are trying to integrate, please at least reach out to itsupport@mcgill.ca, and from there we can see whether or not there's additional ones that haven't been integrated. But yes, there are some that are there. There's also one little caveat about the cheating. I think that's something to yeah, Adam just added saying making sure to let us know ASAP. But also just about the cheating aspect, I think if you haven't attended it yet, please also take a look at the assessments webinar that we are offering.
Suzanne asked a question about, will TLS be offering help to new instructors such as one-on-one sessions to set up myCourses? We do, well, we always offer consultations. That's something that we do always offer instructors. However, if you haven't already gone through the myCourses Essentials course that all instructors have been added to in myCourses, we highly recommend that you start there. But if there are, questions or more in-depth questions that you need help with, after having attended these webinars, of course, and looked at the resources, we'd be more than happy to meet with you. And to request one of these, you can simply send an email to itsupport@mcgill.ca to request a consultation.
So there's a question from Francis. So can you have a one-on-one chat with a student? Yes, definitely. It can be organized outside the tool. Let's say for Zoom. You can basically give the feedback in the assignment and then have maybe a place for them to sign up to have that one-on-one chat if it needs to be live. Another thing that you can think about as well, if you want, I'm not sure if this is more pertaining to if you want to have peer feedback. We have a session about peer feedback for assignments as well. So that's something that can be covered in both, but I think in your case, it would be just, it sounds like it's having a chat with the student afterwards. You can also, yes, you can also give different kinds of feedback to students as well. And when you're doing the assignments, actually we cover this well in the assessments webinar, but you can give the different kinds of feedback, whether it's audio or video feedback as well.
All right, any other questions? I think we've addressed everything so far. All right, well, we're happy to end here if there's no other questions. Teddy, if there's anything you'd like to add.
No, I think that's about it. Just feel free to take a look at the resources after this is, most of them are already posted from the previous webinars, but feel free to take a look at that there. And yes, if any more live sessions, feel free to go and register. I think this is pretty much the last week until we focus more on doing more consults later on.
All right, well, thanks everyone. Thanks so much for attending and your great questions and comments, and have a great remainder of the day.